climate species or whatever in a pasture land, it's not going to do so well because it requires a much more life. You know, it requires that that life has done a lot of work and prepared the soil and the environment around it. So basically, we do plant the red cedar, but beside it, we plant a whole gamut of other plants, and each one then starts growing and fulfilling its function. And through time, through our observations and understanding when their functions have been fulfilled, they leave the system by themselves. And so the red cedar, you know, will be planted as a seed, but beside, let's say, even lantana or some other nasty weeds that we have here, camphor laurel and so on, castor bean and other that kind of stuff, they actually fulfill a very important role in nature. They are our early plants. They are there, you know, fixing the biggest mess that we've done, and they are then creating the environment that the next level of succession of plants can come. So that's the whole principle behind syntropic agriculture, is understanding the function that each of those plants have in the system, and then trying to plant them all together. And so and part of those plants are fruit plants, because they do fulfill that niche as well. They have a role in nursing the next generation of plants. And when it's time for them to leave, we go, we eat, and the succession keeps moving on. So biomimicry it's very important, but we have to understand the function of the plants, so we can understand and copy nature, not trying to be above it.
I'll quickly add to that, that I'd just like to use an example of anywhere you like to look, particularly around here we've got a lot of warm weather and rainfall, that you could have a look at some of the most abused country, you know, flogged out stuff, and you go past again a bit later on, or there might be areas where you're looking at it for the first time, but what you're seeing there are plants growing. Doesn't matter how much you might hate some of those plants, you know, they might be devil's fig and camphor laurel, wild tobacco, but you know, subjective as we are, some of them might be native, like, you know, Sally Wattle or Macaranga or anything, lantana, whatever you like. But what you're looking at is vigour, and nobody's fertilising that. That's in action, and this is succession moving forward, and this is vigour in itself. No one's managing it, but you are witnessing vigour, and this is what underpins it, and that's the biomimicry that we use in the syntropic model. The fact that you don't need to actually really contrive anything, as long as you use that assembly of plants in the right successional arrangement and manage it, that you pretty much got it.
Thank you. So I guess as we've all kind of been borne witness to, the old models of agriculture really have been probably one of the most destructive industries on the face of the planet. How well equipped do you think are these ideas around agroecology and reversing some of the impacts that we're seeing, especially I think, which is topical for the Renewfest, is climate change and particularly the CO2 in the atmosphere?
How effective is it? Yeah. Look, in my experience, I think to have the most effect, it needs to have an economic function. We really like to do as much as we can out there to improve the planet, use less, change what we buy. At the end of the day, most of us are still getting in the car and going to work, you know, and we're still forced into a system where we need to survive. We service debt, we do all these types of different things. And at least from my point of view, and working from a background in farming and working with farmers, if we can have a model that is truly successful, and the proof's in the pudding, as they say, that if it really does work, you're going to have a net gain. You know, you're going to have a net gain there, and if it really does work, you can turn that gain into biomass, food, or liquidate that into cash. You can do whatever you want, but the thing is, if that has a function of moving you off the grid, so you're not getting in the car and buying borrowed products and nailing them to walls or something like that, whatever you have to do to get by, then you can attract a whole different mindset towards what you're doing. Not just those people that really want to change and are prepared to sacrifice for change. You can get the farmer up the road who's ground his soil into dirt, into dust, and you can show him something else that he can just see the bottom line. He can just see the bottom line there, and that's where I think change will spread on a different level. I see it as a pyramid. I see people as motivated, very conscious people, motivated through concern for the future, ideology and whatnot, but it moves out and down into the lowest common denominator, for lack of a better explanation. But if we can move down that way and attract people with a better with a better option that gives them a better lifestyle and feeds back positively, then I think we're really moving forward, because we're really reaching out of that small base that we do have now.
Yeah, also just to, it was great to have a couple of Brazilians to run some courses here, and they brought some good hard data as well. And apparently some of those entropic agroforestry systems, they actually been sequestering more carbon than actual natural rainforests, and the rate of carbon sequestration is similar to a monoculture of eucalypt, which seems to be the highest rate. Also, because we do a lot of wood and putting wood in the soil, they actually being able to grow dark soil, black soil, about at an average of about 3 centimeters a year, and that would probably take a rainforest about 100 years to do it. So I think in terms of a climate change strategy, it tackles it in a number of ways. It sequesters much more carbon. As Scott was saying, it allows a much more local livelihood. So it improves the whole environment around it. In places in Brazil where we have vast areas, especially when Ants Gorge is doing his work, he's got about 100 acres as agroforestry. And what they were saying is that it takes about, if you deforest 100 acres, you start changing the rain patterns around you, and then doing a bit of research, and it seems like the opposite is true as well. When you reforest 100 acres, you tend to then change the rain patterns as well, and you start having more rain. And also, just talking from experience, in our little plot in Chillingham, which is, it's very young, it's only about probably 8 months old. Once we have Cyclone Debbie there, we had about 700 mil of rain dumped in 24-36 hours, and that was actually very little destruction, apart from a little bit of soil movement. We saw farms around it that lost almost everything, organic farms and things like that. So I think syntropic farming can tackle many ways, add resilience, sequester carbon, economic, social, you name it. I think it brings a lot of resilience.
You can make a living while you're doing it.
Now, just to add a few resources for you guys. There's a TED talk about related issues from Pablo Titonel. He talks about agroforestry. Another one is Miguel Altieri. He talks about the resiliency of forestry systems. Now, they are multi-layered, they're three-dimensional, and they bounce back to climate, to extreme weather events much faster. So his research is about not just how much more strong those systems are, but it's also how fast they bounce back after an extreme weather event, because it's not just about the climate change getting warmer and warmer, it's about the craziness of the weather as well. And if you have a multi-layered system and it's a 3D system that tends to deal with wind, rain, dry, whatever, in a much more efficient way. And as a consequence of that, it bounces back with producing and keeping people and their livelihoods in a more efficient way. So, and we need to go beyond labels as well, because traditional societies, they've been doing this for ages. Now, this is well documented in permaculture, in Hawaii, in Mexico, in Panama, in other places, in which traditional societies have been dealing with forestry and interacting with forestry in a way that we're not fully aware today. And because of that, they're much more resilient to extreme weather events.
Thank you. So I guess we've got a bit more time. We can throw it at you guys. Has anyone got any questions? Okay, and who's done some syntropic farming? I know. Is anyone? Yes, great. So it's already getting out into the community. It's fantastic. So you had a question.
When you were introducing Eurico, you mentioned something about social media or communications. Can you talk a little bit of what you are doing in this field?
I've got a PhD in sociology in a different field, but it's heavily based on community development. And part of what I did was to research how people interact with cultural practices online. How people learn, how they come together, how they organize things. And a common feature of cultural practices that were born before the Western culture is that they didn't have the profit motive, and in most cases they didn't have to be well planned ahead to happen. They were based on natural calendars or religious calendars, and people would just come together. Now, for about 150 years, the process of westernization that we've gone through had just smashed our cultures. Now, we had that old gentleman there complaining about the fact that we lost the generational link, and that's all across the border. Now, it's a different way of doing things. I know it bothers a lot of people, but it's a fact that we have the internet today. It's not a problem, it's a fact. Now, it's not how, it's how we filter, it's how we use it. It's with all of the technologies, like Brian was here from Holistic Management. It's just a tool. It's how we do it, it's what we do with it. So in my case, and you have people like Darren Doherty, you have people like Mark Shepard of Restoration Agriculture, and all of these leading guys in this field, what they tell you is that with internet, you can direct market from your farm. That has never been possible before. So social media today, like it or not, farmers, most farmers don't, it's a tool, and it's a necessary tool, because it can link you with your customers in the flick of a button, and we could never do that before. So we might as well learn how to do it properly. And it's got a lot to do with community development if it's used in the right way. I have a very bright example of a social media user here. It's pretty good.
So just before we go on to the next question, the syntropic farming model is available online through what's happening in Australia as well, because I think most of the literature I've seen is coming direct from Brazil, or is that just the case because it's direct from the source?
So it's been done in Brazil for the past 30 years. Now Victor just have some teaching guests here and teaching courses and everything. He's the person and the team that was with him, the right people to tag along and learn about these things. But the plug is, I've got a school and I want him to come and teach, so pick my contact, because I'm going to hire him to teach you guys.
Well, yeah, unfortunately most of the resources are still in Portuguese, but we had 3 awesome courses. Yeah. So, but so he was just saying that Agenda Gate, which is the kind of the main body in Brazil, they have translated some videos. It's nice, it's exciting, but doesn't really give you the full functions behind it and everything. So But we had 3 great courses. There is 20, 30 or 40 people here in Australia that had the experience. The idea is for us now to kind of work together as a first cell and try to translate as much things, or at least share everything, their notes from everybody, and start to compile information about syntropic farming. And also part of the task is to how do you translate all that Brazilian knowledge into Australian reality. One thing is to use the Brazilian species, which they've been working on 30 years, and they understand how those species, how well they get pruned, how quick they grow, what's the life cycle, and blah blah blah, in that system. So part of the task now is translating all that information to try and find similar species here, native Australian species, that can fulfill those functions. And that and for that we really need the Australian people to get involved as much as possible, especially working with farmers as well, because one thing is to design a plot and plant them. The other thing is also manage them and actually bring them to market, which is an art in itself. So we love farmers to get involved and try to bring a lot of that know-how. And we got Scott here, who is a 5th generation farmer, has a lot of knowledge on that part. But we need farmers from around the country to try and understand some of those principles and apply those principles and share that. So yeah, so I think the idea now is to try and translate some of those sources of information, but a simple translation just won't give us the answers. We actually need Australian people with Australian knowledge to pitch in and start sharing what they know, so we can together build a database of plants, understand the functions, so we can easily teach the principles behind it. But the elements that will fulfill those functions, it's still very raw, and we need as much input as possible.
Yeah, it's still very early days, very, very early days in Australia and possibly the Western world and culture. But we're off to a really, really good start, and this will happen pretty fast. A lot of people are collaborating now to put things together and share everything out. We already have a lot of knowledge in general, and we just need to apply that to this and watch out. It's going to happen quickly.
Is there a question?
So thinking about syntropic farming, like in similar ways how they've had urban permaculture, so would there be space for having urban syntropic farming?
I believe so. The function is scalable.
Yeah, I think absolutely. We do have to fulfill the reality of this planet, where more than 50% of the world lives in cities. But the principles, the idea is we work with life, we build life, and every action we do is towards building more life. And that can be in 1 square meter, or it can be in 100 acres. The principles are still applicable.
Do you have something else to add, Sharon?
Well, I guess I've got a question more than anything. So, are there many Australians practicing syntropic farming?
Not yet.
Not yet.
So, how many are there?
The course, well, during the course, we had about 40 people that attended the courses, and now they are excited. It's now up to them to start applying that, and hopefully we can together generate enough interest that more people can get to know through them, through us, through whatever means that they can then start applying.
Got 2 sites to visit, their site and the St. Helena site as well.
I just thought I'd quickly mention to everyone here that course was only done about a week and a half ago, so it's very, very fresh to this country. And there's a place up in Tolga that's near Atherton Tablelands. They're sort of officially putting it into their 5-acre system there. So that's a sort of big official push towards it. Otherwise we have small groups around these parts.
Do you have any more questions?
I don't know. if I missed it at the beginning or not, but I'm struggling to understand the difference between the syntropic farming and permaculture. Like it sounds.
Yeah, I can tackle that one.
I was thinking about it as we went through the questions and comments, and I suppose what we're talking about, it's ecological literacy, and different people who have mastered it to a very high level, they came with principles and ways or directives, as we also would like to say, things to do, how to apply those principles. And he's a Swiss guy working in the for the past 30 years. Has a peculiar way of explaining things according to his philosophy, according to his understanding of ecology and that sort of stuff. But I guess it's a future problem. We think to box things too much. There are way more similarities between these takes than we assume. Of course, there are particular things and different things within them, but I guess we're just too used to box everything up. We should integrate more, I suppose. I don't see, there are differences, but the ideology behind a food forest is not that far from the ideology behind syntropic farming, to my understanding.
Yeah, I'll just start by saying that, as you probably know, permaculture is a whole systems design. It's a set of design principles. The concept of a food forest exists, and there are, again, a set of principles there. The key difference with syntropic farming is it's not a set of design principles. You don't go through a great big black book to find out all the stuff, as great as that is, and as complementary as they are. It's like the syntropic agriculture is the ultimate food forest, and it's also a combination of zones, which was separate in permaculture. There was zone 2, 3 and 4, because of the inclusiveness needed for the function of syntropic agriculture, and I will go into this. Everything must grow together for the sake of its function, and so syntropic agriculture is key. It's instructive. Like you do have to do the right things. Like with permaculture, with a food forest, you can't really bugger it up. You can kind of starve if you don't do it right, but that doesn't really matter at this point. Cultures have taken permaculture to great levels overseas, where they need to have a calorie base. But with syntropic agriculture, it is a specific method of growing plants of all kinds in a way that they function in nature. And there are specific ways to do that, and it's basically relies on the fact that plants grow together in certain type of groups that they call consortiums, and these work, succession underpins this. And like I was saying before about biomimicry, you just have to look beside the road and see all those weeds and understand that that's vigour. And so it's that underpins syntropic agriculture, and then it's the management of that succession. So I won't go into the full-on details about it, but it is specific and it is instructive, and you can do it right and you can do it wrong. And so there's a certain basic set of principles. It's actual, it is literally agriculture on that way. So yeah.
For the full-on details, you get my contact and you get a course with Victor.
Look, I've noticed that through the best part of the time I've been here, we haven't talked much about what's under the ground. We've talked heaps and heaps and heaps about what's above the ground, and we have, you know, there are the odd references to what's below the ground, you know, nitrogen and things like that. I'd just like to say that this is with the syntropic agriculture. One of the things that underpins is what goes on underground. You know, we do understand now that plants talk to each other, and this is a really key part of syntropic agriculture. Syntropic agriculture observes that there are signals under the ground, and the soil food web is the network. And apart from a passing regard, it's actually key to the function. And this soil food web is what underpins everything above the ground, and the rest of it is just a matter of the course of time.
It somehow related to your question, but a little bit different. So Scott's been talking about the vigor of pioneer plants and trees. And the funny thing about syntropic farming is that Ennett, the Swiss guy in Brazil, he's using gum trees, which in Brazil is an invasive, and it's the main drive behind his biomass production to feed the soil. So you see, if you understand.
In my case, I don't have a name for what I'm doing, so I just apply different experiences, different principles to manage a land that is with particular conditions. So I use permaculture principles, agroecology processes, agroforestry. I mean, anything that makes sense to me, it works there, I'll do it. And I encourage to use more of the native species, but if you have an invasive species, use it. I mean, it's there, it's abundant. I'm more fundamentalist. I try not to use, I only have one casuarina tree in my farm, which I love it because it looks so different from the others. But use whatever, it's there available. And what I do is usually work in a successional way. So sometimes cattle is important, sometimes it's not, take it off. And eventually I will because cattle is not natural to the forest system. They evolve in a different environment, in an open grasslands. But chickens and pigs are natural to the forest. So I'm gonna end up using chickens and pigs for the next step of the succession. So you have to wait many years. You cannot do everything at once. What syntropic agriculture does, agroforestry does, as I understand, is accelerate that succession. But you have to invest a lot of time, a lot of energy, plant a lot. And in my case, I didn't have all those resources, time and labor to develop the land, so I had to wait for the natural regeneration process to take place and kind of manage it, a little bit. While in my place in the mountains, I applied permaculture on a degraded pasture land, so I did everything by hand from scratch. So that's a different approach. That will depend on how much energy you have, how much health you can get.
Can I just add to that? There is, within tropic farming, there isn't an underlying fact that you have to spend that much money or you have to spend that much labor. We really try to work with the people that is running it and trying to understand what resources that person has. Both in terms of time and money and labor, and it's the syntropic. We always follow the principles, but in Brazil, when people do require a quick return on investment, then you need to follow certain paths to be able to get that return on investment. If people has 10 years to get a return, then we can easily follow a different path. So it's not one way or the other. It's really, we try to work with the reality of that person. We don't impose anything on anybody, but we try to see what resources that person has, what he needs in terms of return, and what time frame does he have to play with. And then we try to develop systems that will fulfill that in the best possible way.
I might just ask one more question. I guess within the agroecological system that I'm developing, and certainly, and I've noticed it, and it was really evident with the picture that you showed of the bird on your farm returning to the land. Is there any documentation that's being developed, especially perhaps in Brazil because it's more established, the benefits to the local biodiversity and the greater ecosystem with assisting communities to preserve environment for native birds and all manner of species, really?
Well, I don't have data about it, but it's shown like in coffee groves, in a coffee agroforest, it's almost as many as bird species, and especially ants and ants, birds, and other, I don't remember all the species that are almost as abundant as in the primary forest. It's been shown that over the years. But when you recreate or mimic same systems and bring as many plant species as possible, you will get that wildlife diversity, because there is food for them. And one of the principles is you have to have food for yourself, but also have to have food for the rest of the beings that share the land with you.
Yeah, I think the way that syntropic farming works is trying to sustain as much life as possible below ground, above ground, and everything. And you know, just looking from Ernst's property, in which, well, when he bought it, probably I think in 30 or 40 years ago, was just a dry land. It was just dry as, couldn't grow anything. Today is 100 acres worth of forest, and the whole ecosystem has changed, and indeed it has encouraged much more wildlife and our levels of wildlife. And you know, the key thing behind syntropic farming is that for us to sustain ourselves, the amount of life we require a lot of life to sustain ourselves. So the whole thing with syntropic forest or agroforestry is to design systems and be able to manage systems that can sustain us. And if we can sustain us, we can pretty much sustain everything around us. And in Ernst's case, you know, there's jaguars running back, and everything below it in a trophic chain. So basically, that's the whole idea. So we're building life so we can actually feed the highest trophic animals, which is us and, you know, some other, but pretty much we require a lot of life to sustain ourselves. And pretty much every food we eat, it's forest food, but they're from clearings in forests. They do require a lot of life in the soil for them to be available. But unfortunately, the way we've been sustaining ourselves is based on external inputs, and we're trying to tell the plant that the food that the soil that they are growing in is actually a rainforest soil, because we're just pumping artificial fertilizer into that. But the idea is that we bring the forest back, and we try to grow those plants in a forest soil as much as possible. And the problem that we see is not the clearing itself. Clearing is just a natural part of the forest succession, and in any forest is not a homogeneous patch of plants. You have very different age groups that succeed through natural events. So the problem is not the clearing itself, the problem is not actually letting it regrow and start another cycle. So the way we try to do is we try to encourage regrowth, and if we need to grow plants that are from a clearing, we can create a clearing. But the next stage of succession, the soil and the life within the soil and above soil, it's one level above it. So we can keep ours moving towards a spiral of life and growth, and be able to feed ourselves and feed everything else underneath it that requires a lot of life.
In terms of biodiversity, one thing he says, I don't know whether that comes from factual data or not, but we have a lot of birds in Brazil as well, and he actually warns us that as soon as you start using this, they will come back. And the first wave of questions from the students is, how do I prevent these birds, because they're eating my fruits? And he goes like, well, you don't. That's not the point. The point is that's the bit of data that I'm not sure whether it's factual or not. He says you have to plant 20 to 30% more so that they can eat and live for you to harvest. So that's the only bit of data that I have about that in relation to tropical farming.
Is there any other questions?
The other thing I want to say is that his main production is cacao beans in the south of Bahia, which is a state in Brazil. And a few years ago, he says in documentaries and courses as well, every other farm that was having cacao beans in monoculture got devastated, but his. So talks about the resilience of the system again. It was a fungal disease and a bug disease, and everyone else lost the entire farms but him.
Any other questions?
I'd just like to share something, make an informal invitation, because we, as you guys mentioned, we just run the courses, and we have a newborn system just in place, and we work every fortnight and on Mondays, a working bee. If anybody want to join and have a feel, observe how things have been done, we'll be able to share a little bit more as well. That's on Santa Elena Road. What number is that? 10, Santa Elena Road. So if anybody's interested, from 8 until dark, we'll be there on Mondays.
No other questions?
I guess I got one. I don't know if it's getting into the boxing upper mentality things again, but we have hydro produce, we have organic produce, we have conventional produce. Can we have a standard that is regenerative produce? Would that sort of shut people up or make some sort of recognition? Because you can go two ways with this. You start creating resilient communities that can resist larger sort of corporate bodies taking extra profits, or you can actually sell en masse large stories that the consumer in Australia, you can rely on them for 1.8 seconds to look at the box to make their decision. That's quoted directly from Ian McConnell, WWF, beef farming. That's anyway. Is there potential in that path, do you think?
I don't know, but I would just like to say that I hope just through the evolution of our culture and the complexities that we use, the particular phase of civilization that we're in now in regards to climate change and everything else, I just hope that one day it was just called like what it was always used to be called, which is just food. That'd be good.
So I guess because we've talked about it in the past, there's an alternative local certification to, a guarantee in accordance to certified organics, in that the local people, the local community and the local farmers can self-audit and self-regulate in order to determine the standard of food production that we all want, which is chemical-free and it's regenerative and it's developing an ecology. So there is some information at the back. It's a program that I've just got going the last couple of years called FEED, which stands for Farmer Endorsement of Ecological Development, and these guys and everything that you're doing fits so perfectly well into that. So it would be great to see an opportunity to work more with that opportunity. So
yeah, another interesting part of the equation. You know, one part is how we grow food, but the other one is how we consume food. And I think we could get rid of the labels if the people consuming food actually come and visit the practices, and then we wouldn't need any label because they would see what's happening on one side and what's happening on the other side. So it's part of people actually taking responsibility. It's just too easy to blame the neighbor or the government or whoever else.
Or the failure of the labeling system.
Exactly, or just sitting behind an organic label, which you know, it doesn't really solve all the problems because you know there is a few dodgy people out there behind the label as well. So just take responsibility for our own actions and go and check it out, you know, and that's part of what they try to do mostly in Brazil. And that's I think what everybody here in the panel would probably support is come and have a look, come and see, come and pick for yourself, see how the soil looks, how the plant smell, how it tastes from the vine, how it looks on the vine, and then you don't really need any label because you actually know. And more than buying food, we need consumers that understand that you're actually planting forests, that you're actually keeping people on the land, and you're doing the right thing, not only for yourself but for the greater good. Not everybody here it's meant to be a farmer, but as a consumer you are a vital part of the equation, because without conscious consumer it's very hard to be in this system in which our products incorporate every single social, economic and environmental aspect of it, and our prices reflect that, whereas the prices that you find at Coles and Woolies and all the supermarkets, everybody's paying for it even though you're not buying it. So you're actually getting a much better product when you get from an agroforestry system, or a syntropic system, or a permaculture system, or something like that. Not only your food will be better, but you're actually helping the planet. You're helping people that are doing good work to stay on the land and be able to continue their work. So we need conscious consumer that actually takes responsibility and actually value good food and value that without good land and good water, they can't survive either.
Thank you very much, and thank you all for your participation today, and thank you all for coming along. And I think that's about it for the food pod. So thank you, and please put your hands together for some. And given that there's such a wealth of information and talent, please reach out and connect and continue the conversation, and hopefully with the sorts of discussions that we've had today, we really can build some better food systems within our local community. Thank you very much.